Is up, YouTube? This is your host, Ranee B, here spilling that homicidal tea. And today's tea that's being brewed, unnecessary roughness blend. As we always ask around here, please like and subscribe, and definitely come back if you like good content, because that's all we have to offer here as per usual. Well, now that that's all out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the solved homicide case and senseless loss of Haley Anderson. On Thursday, March 8th, 2018, Haley Anderson, a 22-year-old senior at Binghamton College in Binghamton, New York, she was hanging out with her roommates, just playing board games and drinking. They finished their meal shortly before 4 a.m., as college kids do, and they all went to their independent bedrooms and beds. They were all in their final year of their studies at Binghamton University. And again, like I said earlier, that was in Binghamton, New York. And I keep wanting to say Birminghamton, so this is difficult for me for some reason. But they were all looking very much forward finally to graduating. Haley was enrolled in their nursing school and actually already had a job lined up in Long Island at an emergency room. That's pretty cool. Josie, that's Haley's roommate. She realized that Haley wasn't in bed whenever she woke up a few hours later. This didn't really bother her a lot because they were all college students. They were self-sufficient and did their own thing. But later that night, though, she started to become kind of anxious because Haley had planned on meeting Josie and a few of their other friends at a pub. She didn't show up, and that was really unusual for her. Josie also discovered that she hadn't updated any of her social media feeds that day, and there was no answer when she phoned her on her cell phone either. None of the text messages were returned as well. So Josie and another roommate used the Find My Friends app to follow Haley's iPhone, and her phone was located at a residence on Oak Street. There was a man named Orlando Tercero who resided there. Now, Orlando was also in the nursing program. He and Haley had dated for a little over a year, just on and off. Orlando grew up in Nicaragua before he came to the United States to further his education. He was a decent student who studied throughout the week and enjoyed partying on the weekends. Hey, I remember those days. Now, Michelle Topali was the other roommate. They headed with Josie to Oak Street to see if Haley was there. The residence on Oak Street had been a subject of a police call earlier that day. Orlando's sister requested that they do a welfare check after she started receiving distressing text messages from Orlando. Police were dispatched to the residence, but there was no response, and there was really nothing wrong outside, and they looked around, and there just seemed to be no problem, so they departed. At the residence, though, nothing looked out of the norm, but when Josie and Michelle arrived, they didn't leave. They stayed because they were concerned about Haley's safety. Orlando's car, it wasn't outside, but they knew that Haley's phone was still inside thanks to that app. So they spotted an open window, and Josie let Michelle climb inside first, and then she followed her. They discovered Haley in Orlando's room. She was half tucked beneath blankets, and they weren't sure, but because she was so pale, they assumed that she was dead. They dialed 911. When police and emergency personnel arrived at the residence, they confirmed that Haley had passed. She had died as a result of strangulation. Orlando vanished without a trace. Usually happens that way on these channels, doesn't it? Haley and Orlando, they dated on and off according to the police, but Haley had stopped the relationship. She wanted to keep her friendship open with Orlando, but he had other ideas. They had been dating about a year, and Orlando was looking for something more serious and committed in the relationship, and Haley just wasn't interested. She didn't want to be tethered down during her first few years and, the new world and a new job and, just getting out of college. She wanted to be, kind of unbridled. So an unsettling occurrence had occurred 6 months before, which could have lent some credence to her decision. And it was 6 months before she was discovered dead, according to this inquiry. She was at a party on September 15th, 2017, when Orlando was spotted ranting at her. He found out that she had rekindled her relationship with her ex-boyfriend, Kevin Ocampo, and he was not pleased. He wanted to be with her on a one-on-one relationship with just him. Haley informed him again that she did not want that, but she still wanted to be friends. Kevin slept in Haley's apartment that night. The next morning, he discovered that Haley's car's tires had all been slashed. The incident was reported to the police by Haley, but Orlando denied it, of course. Now, because the damage had exceeded $600, felony charges would have been likely, but Haley did not want Orlando to get expelled from college. What about your tires, dude? Anyway, whatever, hindsight 2020, right? Anyway, she didn't want him to get expelled, so she promised not to file charges just as long as he paid for the damages. He seemed like he started becoming more and more obsessed with Haley, according to Haley's friends. He'd show up unannounced to her apartment and then drive over and over and over, back and forth. He kept a close eye on her at all times. He was still thinking there was a chance. So after Haley had stopped drinking and playing board games that night with her companions, police needed to figure out what occurred after that. What brought her to Orlando's house? I mean, they were aware that there were a number of security cameras in the vicinity and outside of Orlando's home. They looked at them and they saw Haley and Orlando walking into his house together. I mean, Haley seemed fine at this point, and she seemed eager to get in the house. Orlando had left the residence alone a few hours later, according to the tapes. But then he returned home after purchasing 2 sleeping aids, NyQuil and melatonin, from a local drugstore. He departed again 7 hours later, walking down to the home's basement, according to the surveillance tape. Orlando had allegedly attempted suicide in the basement at that moment, according to the police. Hooks and ropes were discovered down there, but instead, it seemed like he fell and had actually harmed himself. In the basement, there was blood on the floor, not enough to, signify that's where a murder scene was or anything, but they did discover that what seemed to be a suicide note written in Spanish with the following English translation. Something to the effect, "I'm truly sorry about this. I never thought I would be capable of performing something like this. I'll see you soon, Father." See, his dad had died about 5 years before. They thought the message was not just a suicide note, but pretty much a manifesto/confession. Orlando was seen then leaving the residence with luggage, and the police followed him to JFK International Airport. He had boarded a plane to Nicaragua. His mother still remained in Nicaragua, and he actually held dual citizenship. In terms of prospective extradition, officials in Nicaragua did not have to extradite him to the United States since he possessed dual citizenship. Despite this, U.S. officials charged him with second-degree murder in the hopes that he would confess. And hopefully then he would be extradited to the United States to face charges. Authorities in Nicaragua made every attempt to locate Orlando, and he was discovered after 5 days in a hospital in Leon. He was in the hospital seeking medical attention for those injuries after his attempted suicide. And the only reason I'm making light of it is because somebody who kills someone just for breaking up with them, go ahead. There was a lot of back and forth between U.S. and Nicaraguan authorities, and it took over a year for Nicaragua to feel that they had enough evidence to prosecute Orlando and bring him to trial. This trial would be held in Nicaragua, much to the dismay of U.S. officials, and the accusations would be different from those that he faced from the U.S. He was charged with femicide. It's a specific hate crime in Nicaragua that entails the killing of a woman, and it's actually pertinent to the gender of the victim, and it also requires that they have a connection, like a marriage or a relationship, something like that, but it's something completely different than the United States has. So it's considered a hate crime, and it's very serious in Nicaragua. The accusation was not the only point of contention, though, in the courtroom. There was no jury in a Nicaraguan courtroom. A judge would listen to both the prosecution and the defense before rendering a decision. Orlando was likewise exempt from entering a plea. According to the prosecution, Haley freely entered to that residence with Orlando, and he strangled her to death in a very short time. They believed that he strangled her in a jealous frenzy after she refused to be in a meaningful relationship with him, and that he let his wrath fester for 6 months. They thought that it probably started at that party 6 months ago when he had found out that Haley had reconnected with her ex-boyfriend. The court used teleconferencing to hear from witnesses in the United States, and some of Haley's acquaintances testified about Orlando's obsessive behavior with her, and that's also including all the times he drove by her apartment and contacted her over and over and over, as well as the cut tires and slashed tires and all that. The judge reviewed the security footage from outside Orlando's home, which showed him arriving with Haley and exiting without her. Orlando attempting suicide, according to the court, and the note that he left for his family, which was discovered, all played right into the prosecution's hands. Dr. James Turgeon, a pathologist who had performed Haley's autopsy, concluded that the asphyxiation by neck compression was what caused her death. Haley was asphyxiated with manual neck compression with an element of ligature strangling owing to the necklace that she was wearing. Now, according to the prosecution, Haley was murdered because she refused to be with him. And it was her decision, but it was one that he didn't approve of. Therefore, he took her life. Again, femicide in Nicaragua, this plays right into it. Orlando had no recall of what transpired that night. Isn't that cool? I love that. It happens almost to every one of these guys. They claim that Orlando was briefly mad at the time of Haley's death owing his usage of alcohol. Okay, you know what? Every story, these people lose their brains, they lose their memories, and it's all because of alcohol. I'm telling you, I've been drunk many times, and I've been on many substances in my life, and I remember everything. Well, only one witness, a psychiatrist, was brought to testify regarding his mental condition. When Orlando was checked by Dr. Ronald Lopez Aguilar, he maintained that he had no recollection of the murder. Again, how convenient. He said that he drank significantly that night, and when he woke the next morning, Haley was dead. Oops. He didn't know what had happened to her either. According to Dr. Lopez Aguilar, there is no way to tell what Orlando's mental condition was at the time. Isn't that weird? Again, there's so many of these just, drunk. Next. However, he assured the court that there was nothing wrong with his current state of mind. Orlando, he wasn't a violent man, according to the defense. He just may have been provoked. Oh, that's great. Why don't we victim shame? The judge took a break for 90 minutes before returning with a decision. My goodness. Orlando was found guilty, of course. And according to Judge Fabiola Betancourt, what bothered her the most was that Orlando didn't just not have respect for Haley. He didn't have respect for her to make her own decisions. That he just simply got rid of her because she didn't want to date him. And that he intended to punish her for eternity for rejecting him. For the charge of femicide, she gave him the largest penalty that she could, which was 30 years in prison under Nicaraguan law. She informed the judge that every woman has the right to life. We witnessed something that we have never seen before, she said. We saw two governments working together, law enforcement agencies working together. Orlando, he filed an appeal on his conviction, and in Nicaragua, the appeal was considered by 3 magistrates. The defense's case was the same. Orlando was intoxicated and momentarily insane at the time of the murder. Nevertheless, they requested a second mental exam from the court. The one that was in the first trial was done by a court-appointed psychiatrist, and the defense requested that Orlando be examined by a forensic psychiatrist who specializes in temporary insanity defenses at an appeal hearing instead. They also claimed that Orlando was charged with second-degree murder in the United States, and if he was convicted, that he would have gotten a lighter sentence. So then why didn't they extradite him? Oh my God. And then they even went on to contend that he shouldn't have been charged with femicide in the first place. Oh my God. Okay. The request for a new psychiatrist? Denied. The magistrates, they declined to decrease his sentence too. Yay, Nicaragua! On the basis of his 30-year sentence handed down at his trial, he was ordered to remain in jail. Now, of course, I gotta put my girl in here. I put her in almost every one of my videos. I need to start paying her royalties.
Electric chair.
Boom. Exactly what she said. That's what I wish he would have gotten. But anyway. Now, if Orlando is ever released and returns to the United States, police in that county, they've already stated they will arrest him immediately so that he may face trial for the second-degree murder there. Like, double jeopardy, that's for the states, honey, because you were convicted in another country, so we can get you here too. Now, Karen and Gordon Anderson, Haley's parents, they thanked the court for their efforts, and when the appeal was dismissed, they said again, thank you very much for denying that appeal. Karen added that he's shown no remorse as far as she could tell, and that the only remorse that he expressed was when he wasn't able to get his sentence reduced. Unfortunately, she said, I don't believe that 30 years was sufficient, but I mean, what can you do? Orlando, he suffocated a young woman who was most likely asleep and had been drinking. It doesn't get any sicker or more evil than that, in my opinion. So, I mean, he fully overpowered a woman that had no chance to defend herself. So, yeah, I don't know what's happened to him in prison since, but hopefully it wasn't good. But anyway, I really hate this for the family. I hate all of this. These stories, I don't know if it's just because I'm doing more of them, but they're just getting to me more and more. So, yeah, I really hate this for her family, but I wonder if they're working on some sort of like Haley's Law or something where they can enforce, more of that punishment that, like, if they don't fit so neatly into crimes in the law, like they could, like so many of these cases that could just slide under the radar of the United States judicial system. I sure hope they do, though. I mean, that would make this case almost easier to comprehend why it happened, I guess. As always, I absolutely adore y'all. Oh my gosh, the comments, I love y'all. And the direct messages, they're so great. And I have yet to really get any nasty comments yet. And if I do, though, I just put a heart next to them and say, thanks for the view. Anyway, but I'm sure that you guys have tons of cases that you want me to cover. Let me know, because I mean, I'm getting some really good ideas. I've got, like I said, a ton of scripts written and a lot of great recommendations. So there's a lot to come. I hope you enjoyed this one, though. And until next time, try not to kill anybody. And I mean, like, if you have to, I'm probably going to have to cover you on this channel. So until then, I'll see y'all later. Bye.